Hello, everyone. This is Cece, and we are on another episode of Raw Honey. And in this season where I'm interviewing people about hard things that have happened to them in their life and how they've coped from those things. So today I want to introduce you to my dear friend, Haley. I've known her for years. We went to college together. We played the same sport in college for a little bit, which was a really interesting time in our lives. And I just am really excited to introduce Haley. She is just such a driven and motivated person and really has just some incredible skills and hobbies that she just really keeps in her life and just is really true to herself through those things. So I wanted to get her on the show today to talk about something hard she's been through. But first, just to get to know Haley. Haley, you can introduce yourself, talk about, what you know about Raw Honey, what you think about it, and anything else you want to say to start us off.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on, Cece. I'm happy to be able to talk to you. My name's Haley. Cece and I have known each other for a long time now, and we recently reconnected, and that's been really great. I really like what you're doing with the show here. I feel like it's really good to get people to express themselves emotionally, and I feel like it's a good way to help others that might be going through something similar, and just see that they're not alone in their experiences, and that, everyone's going through these really complex, difficult times in their lives, especially this past year. And so I think it's a good thing to, put that out there into the world and kind of put this energy out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always forget to talk about your mom too, because I love your mom so much. Because I hope we'll send her the episode after, but your mom was also a really special person in my life. And just was sort of like another mom to me, closer to home, because we just, you guys obviously were closer to our college town than I was. So I really appreciate your mom too, and just everything you guys did for me. But getting back to you, so tell us about just whatever that hard thing is, and just give us a little synopsis of that, and then we'll have a conversation about it. So whenever you're ready.
All right. So the hardest thing, when Cece asked me this question, the hardest thing that really came to mind was just recently in October, my father passed away. And growing up, I had an interesting relationship with him. He had been an alcoholic pretty much my entire life. And so just the kind of effects of that and his actions on my life had a really big impact. And like, my mom was awesome, like Cece said, so I definitely felt her support through all of it. But who he was as a person impacted a lot of how I am today and the ways that I cope with different emotions and stress like that. And then him passing away this past year and going through that grieving process definitely opened up, a lot of old emotions that I'd had from my childhood about him. And then kind of going through the process of figuring out like how I want to connect with him now as an adult, now that he's gone, and how I want to choose to remember him and the value that he put into my life has been difficult to say the least. But I think I'm definitely in a good place now where I can kind of share that with Cece and then, with everyone else.
Yeah, of course. I can't imagine. Like I told you earlier, my cousins and my uncle recently passed away, and we just had the virtual funeral yesterday, the week before that, and just like hearing people talk about their dad and realizing just how close that person is to you, even if you're not really close to them, just sort of how intimately connected they'll always be to your creation is got to be just inherently so painful when they have to go, especially when they have to go so abruptly. Do you feel like you were ready for that in any way, or was there any Was it a complete surprise or was it pretty expected?
I think it had definitely been expected for a while, unfortunately. You know, it's something like alcoholism. It's not really like a big immediate thing where it's like, oh, they're fine one day and then the next day they're gone. It's a slow progression. It's a really slow progression that kind of affects every aspect of your life. And something with alcoholism that a lot of people don't know is it actually will change someone's personality. So, like, the father that I knew was definitely not the one that a lot of his friends growing up knew, and like the people he went to college knew. So that's something that's really hard. And then he definitely, towards the end of his life, and even when we were in college together, kind of was on the down and outs. So it's definitely something that took a couple years of knowing that this was probably how everything was going to end. But still, the final, like, this is it, that was definitely a little bit of a shock.
So do you feel like throughout your childhood, you've sort of been in a continuous state of grieving a father?
Ooh.
You know me, I go deep.
I mean, in a certain way, like I could definitely see that, and I feel like a younger me definitely would have agreed with that statement, just because, you know, you look out at everyone else's family and it's like, you know, they're doing the typical family things, and then I would look at like my dad and how he was acting, and it was very different, and it was kind of like wishing I had that relationship that a lot of people have with their fathers. There's a part of me that definitely feel like I missed out a little bit on that.
Yeah.
But
when do you think that you came to terms and just sort of accepted the family dynamic that you had?
I think I've always, like, you know, when you grow up and something like that, you always kind of accept it to be the way that it is. So it was definitely something that, like, I always kind of knew, like, hey, my life isn't exactly the same as everyone else's that I'm growing up with, but this is how it is, and you know, you have to make the most of it while you're still there. And like, he had some really good moments when I was growing up, where, you know, he'd show me how to fix something, or we'd go and repair some weird farm implement that only he knew how to fix. So there were definitely good times, and you sort of learn how to appreciate the times that you do have, rather than really dwell on all of the other things that make up the rest of your life.
That seems like a really positive approach to have, which I don't feel like is always what people fall into in this situation. So I'm glad that you're not filled with, you know, anger and resentment. And where do you think that you sort of found all that peace with it? Was it from your mom, or was it just something that sort of happened?
It was definitely, you know, a lot of it was my mom.
Yeah.
You know, she's an incredible figure in my life. She's so strong, and she definitely always was upfront and explained things to me and made sure that, you know, I felt loved and appreciated and understood. So having her, she really was the driving force in my life and taught me how to be a lot of what I am. And then at some point when I was in high school, you know, when you're in high school, you're angsty, you're angry at the world. And I remember I watched this random YouTube video that kind of took my experiences and reframed it. So they talked about how, you know, the way that things happen to you and your experiences in the world, like, those are always going to happen, but you can always change your interpretation of those experiences and choose how you want to react to them. So it's like, if someone says something mean, you know, you can, in your mind, reframe that to be like, instead of saying, oh, they're saying this about me because they don't like me, or this, that, and the other thing, and instead be like, they're saying this because, you know, maybe they're lashing out, or maybe there's something happening in their home lives, or maybe there's all these other factors that you can't even see. And so just trying to take a step back and realize that, you know, everyone's going through their own issues, and they all have their own complex lives that you can't even imagine when you're not in their shoes, and just kind of trying to have that empathy with the people around you, I feel like helped me get a more positive view on the world and just kind of reframe my experiences in a more positive light whenever I could.
Yeah, I feel like that is a very like profound and just a much better, I mean, a much truer way to go through human experience and human connection, because so many people, it can always seem like a lot of people are trying to hurt you intentionally. And a lot of the times, you know, those people aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about them, or they're thinking about something to do with them. And it's become, they've like accidentally hurt you maybe in the process, which shouldn't go unknown, but to also sort of reflect on that and realize that it wasn't ever intentional is sort of just a more positive and honest way to understand people, because I feel like it's so easy to just like think everyone's out to get you and trying to hurt you, and it's to be able to like understand that is as not all about you is like a really just takes a lot of weight off of your shoulders, you know? Like it really it just it makes you able to live a life without so much like unnecessary sensitivity. Which sensitivity isn't bad. Like you shouldn't, like if someone like, you know, says really rude things to you, it's not just going to roll off. But
No.
I think that the way that you reflect on it and understand their intention and how much you're going to let it affect you is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then just kind of on that same topic, I think a really big thing with relationships, and something that was a big takeaway with me in terms of being with my dad, is how to set boundaries in your relationships, whether that be with friends, family, romantic relationships. That can be such a huge step that really helps set healthy relationships, because, you know, having to establish those boundaries where it's like, I can be here for you in this amount of, like, in this capacity, but past that, you know, you're asking too much of me, and instead, like, we can have a good, genuine relationship without moving past those boundaries. I know that's something I definitely had to set up with my dad, and I feel like having those things with your friends and being honest about the places you can and can't go helps you have even better relationships in the end.
How do you figure out what those boundaries are?
I think it's definitely a learning process, and you're never going to get it right the first time. I know I definitely didn't get it right when I was growing up a lot of the times, especially in romantic relationships, because you kind of want to give all of yourself to that person, you know? But sometimes it's almost more healthy to keep not a part of you back, but like save certain things that like you talk to your friends about, and you don't necessarily unload everything in your life onto them, because like you have those certain boundaries within there, and obviously that's something that can always be like renegotiated. In fact, I think talking about it and having honest communication makes it even more healthy in the end, because you can always adjust where those boundaries are.
Yeah. What is it like with your dad? What did that look like to communicate those boundaries to him?
I think it definitely looked a lot like deciding when and where I wanted our interactions to be when I was an adult. You know, I didn't want him to be so involved in my life that he was going to be a negative presence, and that was going to spill into other aspects of my life and kind of make me less happy and less able to focus on the things that I needed to in college, especially. And so my mom helped me a lot with that, because she would always help me set up like times to meet with my dad so I could still retain a connection with him, and still make him feel like, you know, he could be my father and support me as I was going through college and then graduating. But, you know, limiting those times to be like a dinner or a phone call on Father's Day or his birthday and stuff like that. So it's like, because I was seeking out the interaction rather than the other way around, it allowed it to be a lot more healthy. and just kind of, you know, when you're on the phone with someone for a long time saying like, hey, I can only be on for this amount of time, and then there's something that I have to go do, like I have a prior engagement, and just setting up that boundary ahead of time so that they understand what they can expect from that interaction rather than leaving it open is kind of how I dealt with that.
Would you say your mom kind of created that boundary with you then?
I think she definitely helped. You know, she would remind me to do things like reach out to him, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, if he was having a bad day, say like, hey, you know, you should reach out to him and make sure that like you're doing that, which was definitely good in terms of like I wanted to step away more once I got older, but I think retaining that small relationship with him made it a lot easier once he actually passed away, because I felt like, you know, I did my due diligence as his daughter in order to make sure that like he could have that connection with me, even though it wasn't like the big full relationship that I'm sure a lot of other people had. But I think even having that was good for him.
So was it more about him at the end of the day, or was it about you, or both?
I'd say it was about both of us. You know, it's about him, and that I wanted to still connect with him and make sure that he didn't feel like I forgot about him. But it was also about me, and that I wasn't going to give too much of myself over to him and then feel bad about it at the end of the day. It was kind of a balance of like reaching out so much that I don't feel guilty about not doing it, making sure that I'm there to support him, but also like not overextending myself so that I feel worn out or depressed afterwards, because, you know, I spent all this time talking about or like rehashing old things or getting into old arguments that didn't need to be had. So it's like doing that sort of thing definitely made it a more healthy relationship towards the end.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just interesting to compare, you know, hearing how you had to navigate that relationship with your dad. Just it's complicated. It sounds really complicated. I can't.
Family's always complicated.
It is. It is. I just, you know, you don't, like, so many people have complicated issues with their parents or a different family dynamic that lends itself to having to create boundaries and do that kind of stuff. And it feels like that kind of made you grow up a lot faster than maybe you would have if he was sort of a real presence in your life and in that nuclear setting that a lot of people grow up in. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had to spend a lot more time Googling things that I feel like you taught me otherwise.
Googling like how to make something, or what do you mean?
It's like, how do I fix my dishwasher? It's
Oh,
not
okay.
running.
I can see like that. I feel like you had to. Do you feel like you were the adult in the relationship, or he was?
There was definitely a lot of times where I felt like I was more of the adult, like setting the boundary and being like, hey,
Yeah.
you know. But it's so hard, especially when you grow up and you actually leave the house. You know, you go off to college, and then, you know, I moved halfway across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely made it, like, the distance itself made that a lot easier. But, I don't know, he was definitely always my dad, but sometimes a more distanced version of that. I don't know that I would say our roles were necessarily reversed.
Yeah, it just sounds like you had to really walk into a lot of emotional awareness and maturity at a young age, which isn't necessarily bad. I think I could just see it being kind of exhausting.
Yeah.
You know?
There was definitely that. I mean, I'm not going to say that I was perfect growing up. You know, I definitely got into my fair share of screaming arguments with my dad as a teenager. But then there was a certain time when I realized, like, that wasn't healthy for either one of us. And like you said, it was exhausting. And so then having to not give in to what I wanted to say to him because I thought it would make me feel better.
Yeah.
But it was mean, so there was no reason to say it. Sometimes it's nice to air out the grievances that you have from your past, and then other times, you don't need to. There's no need to rehash those old things.
Yeah, maybe not with the person that sort of created it. Yeah, I definitely think that there's a time and a place to filter and vent. And who you choose to be that first filter has to be someone that's probably a little bit removed from the situation. Or else it can just be really like just stirring things up and hurtful and not a really safe environment for anyone,
Yeah, that's for sure.
How do you feel like you coped with, how have you been grieving? What was your process so far?
So for me, grieving for him, we did, obviously it's 2020, so we did the whole Zoom memorial, and we got to talk to all his friends from college and hear their stories about him, which was a little heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Just hearing the ways that they viewed my dad. That you never get to see your parents when they were in college, and so hearing about them then that was interesting. And then I got to go with my mom and go through all of the things from my childhood in the old house, and so that definitely helped my grieving process. And then once I got to come back home, back to my apartment, what I did is I honestly just baked a lot. One of the things that we did growing up is we baked a lot of bread. We made a lot of homemade pizza and pizza and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I've been coping with that, and that's definitely, I let myself feel not guilty about eating all of my favorite foods because that was really what I needed in that period of time. So I ate all the pasta and bread and all of the things that I loved from my childhood that made me feel a little bit better, and I let myself not feel bad about that and feel like that was just what I needed to go through. So that was definitely nice. And then I got my motorcycle license so that I could ride his old motorcycle and hopefully feel a little bit more connected to him in that way.
Yeah, that's a lot of different coping processes. I think that I'm really glad that you've dove into the relationship with him, and with the things he left behind and the hobbies that he had, and the way that you grew up with him, those hobbies that you guys had together. I think that's seems like a really hard but also healing way to remember him, and to keep him in your life. Yeah, I've never really lost anyone I've never really had a really tragic loss in my immediate family. I would say my uncle was the first one, but even so, I knew my cousins a lot more than I knew him personally. So I think my heartbreak comes more from the situation and from my cousins and my aunt and what they're going through. But having someone I really know that has died, it just hasn't been a part of my experience so far. So I'm trying to sort of research, grief and try to understand what's healthy. And so I'm grateful to talk about it with you. I'm glad that you're able to talk about it. Yeah, I think that you're handling it in what seems a really healthy and just a really healthy way. I mean, do you feel like you've processed it in a healthy way,
Yeah, I think I have. I had a lot of long conversations with my mom about it.
Yeah.
With, various friends about it. And I feel like one of the things that really helped me was just friends reaching out and making sure that I was okay. And then just doing normal things with them. this definitely would help me kind of do that. So yeah, I think the long conversations with my mom about it definitely helped me process it the most.
And what do
So
those conversations look like? Like, what is that? Is it just tell me about it more, or just random?
yeah, I mean, it was definitely talking about specific ways, specific things that like he had done that had that meaning in our lives, and kind of like how to unpack the memories of him, both good and bad. Um, and then talking about loss, because obviously my mom's a little bit older, so she's been through this before, and talking about like different losses that she's gone through and how she's coped with them, and just kind of normalizing the fact that grieving is a process and it's not going to stop. It's not just going to stop one day. You know, there's always going to be a little part of you that grieves a little bit for them, no matter how much time has passed. And sometimes you'll run into something and it reminds you of them, and you choke up a little bit because you think about that, and then it kind of gives a good excuse to reach out to those people back in your lives. Like I know I call my mom to talk about things that remind me of him, and then kind of unpack that with her, and that's been really healthy for me. So I think that's kind of how I've done it.
Do you think that you would ever want to speak with a therapist about it, or no?
I think it would be a good thing to speak to a therapist about. You know, I definitely think that therapy is really important for people that have been through hardship. And I feel like going to a therapist and being able to talk to someone that's trained in that sort of thing would be a helpful thing to do. But you know, taking the step towards therapy is definitely it's a big step. And one, like I've done over the phone therapy before,
Mm-hmm.
and I definitely talked about my dad a little bit within that before he passed away. So I think in the future I would consider going to a therapist.
Yeah, I think people have an
Yeah.
understanding that therapy is something you do when like you can't handle it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't. I think that it's better to look at it from the preventative standpoint, um, because it's more of an opportunity to unpack and understand how it's affecting you, so that
Mm-hmm.
you can try to understand that before getting into your own relationship, you know, possibly creating a family and seeing maybe subconsciously, you know, being with someone that has characteristics of your father, like that you don't necessarily like, you know, like understanding and unpacking those things before you get into a relationship, or during, you know, whatever. Just like taking the time to professionally reflect, I think is really helpful. And it doesn't have to be just because you can't handle it on your own, you know,
Yeah.
because that's not really the intent of therapy. It's not, if you can't handle things, go to therapy. Like, it's more about learning about yourself, really processing what you've been through in a way that allows you to like move on and heal, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, and I'm really glad you guys have been able to really help each other through this, because I feel like as the widow, even though you know, your parents have been apart for a while, as the widow, typically they're not the ones that can handle talking about it with
Mm-hmm.
the kids, at least not at the beginning. You know,
Yeah.
maybe down the line, but like it's just too triggering for a lot of women in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that you guys were distanced enough from the situation to talk to each other and heal from each other. But I just think that first filter, I think it helps when it's either like journaling or it's some type of professional, because people in the situation can tend to be too personally affected by your processing in your head, you know?
Yeah.
It's just what I've noticed.
No, I think that's definitely true, and um, I feel like it's really hard for especially people people die, it's really hard to talk to parents about it, depending on the relationship that you have with them. I'm really lucky to have the relationship with my mom that I have, where, you know, we can be really open and honest with each other about our feelings. I mean, I definitely know I didn't have that with my father, so I couldn't have even imagined if it had gone the other way. And I definitely would have had to seek some sort of outside help for that. So I feel like it's definitely good to know what resources you have available to you and be able to reach out, you know, before you might even need help in order to prepare yourself for certain things.
And just to, like, give yourself the chance to understand and process a lot of that. Because not, you know, you probably, just knowing you and hearing about your relationship with your dad, like, there's, like, a lot there. And so being able to, like, process that and unpack some of that and see how it has affected some of your characteristics or behaviors in your relationships, you know, I think just kind of gives you a little bit of a roadmap into the future, into knowing what you want in a partner, what you don't want. I feel like a lot of that comes from unpacking your relationship with your parents.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, I really hope everyone goes to therapy at some point, because it's just so interesting if you're, it's really interesting. It doesn't have to be just because, you know, you can't handle it. It's just kind of a chance to be curious about yourself.
I feel like the better that you know yourself, the more prepared you are to face challenges in the future.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. But I'm glad, I mean, it's only been a couple months, so I'm really grateful you're able to talk about it. Do you feel like talking about it here, does it, like, what feelings come up when we're talking about it now? Is it like it hurts, or you're indifferent?
I mean, I feel like it's easy to talk about with you, because obviously you're one of my very close friends. At this point, I feel kind of almost removed from the situation. Like, it hurts to talk about a little bit, just in the fact that it's been a bit. It hasn't been very long since it actually happened. But for me, I feel like my grief comes in the weirdest small moments.
Yeah.
I'm driving, and then suddenly I remember something, and it's like, you know, I'm back to 10 years ago, and it's like it all comes back again. So I feel like talking about it here isn't as bad as the random moments where I'm thinking about it myself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Because those moments are a lot more surprising, you know? Like, we already knew what we were going to talk about today, so it's not as much of a, like, it's just not as much of a surprise, so it probably doesn't hurt in the same way. But I think that's pretty normal of a grieving process. Like, you're seeing sort of ghosts of their memories with you, and you're reliving those a little more intensely than you had when they were still here. I think that's pretty normal. I don't know how long it usually lasts. For some people, I think it lasts forever. But it doesn't always have to be something that makes you sad, you know? Like, at some point, it may be moments that you feel like they're there with you again. Do you feel, I mean, I don't expect you to feel that side of it right now, but hopefully in the future, you know, it's not as surprising, or it's more of a pleasant sort of bittersweet nostalgia kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, I definitely, I sort of feel that with so when I was in high school, my junior year of high school, my track coach passed away.
Yes, I remember that.
And that was the hardest thing I'd been through then. And there was years after that I'd think about him, and I would tear up, just because we'd been so close. You know, he'd been just a huge influence on my life. and, you know, got me into college for all intents and purposes and all this stuff. But I'm sort of coming to terms with it now, like 6 years later, where, you know, something will remind me of him, and instead of immediately wanting to cry about it or, you know, feel hurt for all the time that we didn't get to have together, it's kind of like, you know, I get to be reflective on the fact that, like, he made me the person that I am today and helped me get where I am. So I think I understand a little bit of that, and I definitely hope I can get there more with my father as things move into the future.
Yeah. I think that you being able to talk about it with your mom and have like a couple different healthy outlets and safe spaces is definitely going to lead you down that road of positive reflection and yeah, just healing overall. It's so hard though. I mean, but it's like part of life, you know. We all sort of take it as a surprise when it happens because no one really like wants it to happen, but at the same time, like, it happens to everyone. Like, there's no one around you that's not going to experience death, but yet it feels so alone to grieve sometimes. So it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like we just need to talk about it more because so many people go through it, and it's like, you're not alone, you know. It is totally normal. Like, it's not normal for someone to die, you know, at 60 years old, but the concept of death and grieving is very normal.
I feel like it's really important to make sure people just don't feel alone whenever they're going through something like that. You know, because it's something that you don't have to tackle on your own. You know, you don't have to think through all the times you had together and how sad you are then. You know, it's something that you can share with your close friends, and you can, you know, talk to whoever you trust about that. So it's like, it doesn't have to be a single grieving process that you go through by yourself. And I feel like sometimes it can feel like that, especially how individualistic like our society is. It's like something that you have to overcome by yourself.
Yeah.
So I feel like if people will realize that they don't have to be alone in that, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think people are just afraid to be vulnerable in front of other people. Like, and I like to say that I do like to be vulnerable with people, but I like to be vulnerable on my terms, like when I choose it. And so there's something like this podcast and conversations, like, I'm usually choosing to be vulnerable. But when I am, you know, like when my uncle died, and I just had a really hard time being a part of those conversations because I felt like I was not in control at all. And I was just like, I don't want to watch this video right now. I don't want to be taken off guard by this. But eventually it caught up to me after a couple days, and I was just like tearing up at every song and I was like, you know, I need to be okay with the fact that this is going to be hard for me to listen to, and it's going to hurt. Like, I have to just like let it happen. I mean, I was in a safe space when I really let myself like feel it all. But I stopped like trying to push it away. It was just like, and I talked to my soldiers about it, because we were doing like an MRT lesson, and I talked to them about it, and I was just like, you know, beautiful and tragic things happen all the time in our lives. Like, you know, because I got into that program, and in the same week my uncle died, you know. So it's just like, life is full of like incredibly beautiful and incredibly tragic things, and it's okay to come to work and experience some of that, and like use the people to your right and left to talk about it with and heal with, because all of us are feeling it. So I think I finally like embraced it and allowed it to make me, allowed myself to be human about it, and to kind of ask for help, you know, even just to share it, because it's not like people after that gave me a bunch of advice, but just to share it, I think was a really healing process for me and allowed me to be really brave when I watched the ritual wake and watched the funeral, and just allowed myself to be completely whatever I was about it.
Yeah.
So I feel a lot braver after that situation. I feel really brave after talking to you too and listening to your process, because it's definitely going to be really hard when that time in my life comes. So yeah, I'm really glad we talked about it. Is there anything else you want to say on the topic before we start to wrap it up?
I feel like I kind of said everything I have to say about it.
I know. I'm just glad to have you on the show and to speak on a topic like this. It's not easy, and I hope that the people that listen to it feel like they're not alone, and like they can be brave, and that bravery through this and vulnerability can be really healing. So I hope that we can provide, another tool for people through this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm glad I could come on. I hope, anything I had to say could resonate with someone and hopefully help them going through a hard time, if that's what they're doing right now.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the weekend. If I publish this today, I don't know if I will, because it takes a long time to edit it. I need to start paying one of those people to do it for me, but I'm not making the money to do that right now. So, okay, everyone have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.